Diffractive reticle technology has brought the PLxC in the first focal plane from a good LPVO to perhaps one of the best LPVOs in the first focal plane, at least in 1:8 form factor. We'll be taking a much closer look at some of this thing's rivals momentarily, but until then, just admire the simplicity of this reticle and its overall capability and functionality.
Pew pew! Pew!
Unlike many other manufacturers that have developed a first focal plane LPVO,
Pew pew! Pew pew!
Primary Arms always had great reticle options for the first focal plane PLxC lineup. The ACSS reticles are great for a number of reasons. Most notably is that you can use the reticle effectively at any magnification regardless of your environment, unless you needed illumination, in which case the first focal planes always fell short. To counteract the hole in the market that Primary Arms had seen, they decided to create the PLxC in second focal plane using their Nova Reticle and Nova Bright fiber dot illumination. It was a good step forward, but I felt it took at least one step back. As great as the reticle is, and as bright as the illumination is, I feel that this tiny form factor optic is best suited in the first focal plane.
Pew pew! Pew!
Unfortunately, all of them lacked true daytime bright illumination.
Pew pew!
That is, until now. Primary Arms brought the best of the first focal plane and second focal plane PLxCs to bring them together to create this. But is that all that they managed to do?
Pew pew! Pew!
When Primary Arms first introduced the PLxC, the C standing for compact, it superseded what was then the equivalent of the Trijicon Credo or AccuPower, which was a very large, very heavy first focal plane 1:8. This PLxC shaved off about 6 or so ounces and a lot of size over the overall footprint. It was loved by fans when it first came out, and I myself was one of them. It offered a tremendous amount of stuff in a very small, affordable package. I want to say when these first came out, they were just north of $1,000, like $1,100, maybe $1,200, but you could find them on sale for around the $1,000 to $1,100 price point. Again, this was very early on when they first got released. The only criticism I really had towards this optic, and many others, is the lack of really good illumination. If you weren't using this thing in lower light environments, you'd never have the need, or actually you couldn't use the illumination because it was just pathetic. So what Primary Arms decided to do was introduce the PLxC in second focal plane, shoving their Nova Bright daytime bright illuminated reticle with fiber bright illumination from their SLX series and throw it in this optic. And I thought this would be an amazing setup, because the first focal plane optically was already extremely good, and the Nova reticle, which I've had in both the SLX and the special purpose, which is essentially just a GLX, I love them. They're great reticles. And I was expecting the second focal plane version of the PLxC to be optically on par, if not slightly better than the first focal plane version. I just found that it wasn't. There's more fisheye in this. It didn't seem as forgiving as far as eyebox goes, and it just made the overall experience of using this optic sort of moot. It was not really great. However, Primary Arms saw it fit to deliver one more PLxC to add into the now trifecta, the RDB. This claims to have illumination almost as bright as this Nova, but still have all of the same features of the first focal plane with a slightly tweaked reticle. That means that this optic right here in front of me, ladies and gentlemen, has massive, massive potential for being very, very good. And it better, because the MSRP on this thing nowadays is around $1,700. So with that, let's see what your hard-earned money buys you. Sitting nice and neatly between the first and second focal plane, the RDB finds itself, well, with some big shoes to fill. Weight was always one of the main strong suits for the PLxC. The first focal plane came in at 17.04 ounces on my scale. The second focal plane came in even lighter at 16.86, and this new RDB comes in even lighter than that, 16.7. So how did they even manage to remove even more weight from this? I have no idea. Lengthwise, they're essentially the exact same. In fact, if I put these two side by side and don't show you which one is which, I don't think you'd really be able to tell, with the exception of reading it on the back eyepiece. Now, as far as everything else that goes along with the PLxCs, this RDB has that, meaning it's got amazing touch points and very solid controls. The only real criticism I have is that you still can't really easily line up the turrets to the body. There's a big gap over here. You can, however, run the elevation turret exposed, but non-locking and non-zero stop, which for a scope like this doesn't make any sense to me. As far as the illumination control, it is the exact same as the other two, which means it is sensational. Detent is nice, deep, sharp. There's a nice solid click, and you know exactly when you're going to be turning it on or off. And because this thing has a recessed battery cap like the other two, that means that you don't have to worry about the battery compartment ever getting accidentally unscrewed. And exposing the battery inside is a standard CR2032 with our same 6-finger wonderfully set up PCB board inside. I don't ever have to worry about this battery going anywhere. Nice O-ring on the outside, little spring on the inside to put positive pressure on the battery. So it's doubly, quadruply, triply checked to make sure that everything on this is going to be solid. And it should be no surprise that all three of these are made in Japan. To say I'm very excited about this optic is actually an understatement. When I did my mega first focal plane LPVO comparison, this still came out towards the top despite its minor shortcomings. Illumination not being great, and 7 to 8x being less than perfectly sharp. The rest of the standard first focal plane experience is quite exceptional. So I really hope that Primary Arms has truly improved upon it.
The windage and elevation turret on this thing sounds fantastic, just like they have on all other PLxCs. I only wish that that line that connects the body to the turret was a little bit more defined. I'm going to very quickly go through the tracking setup on this thing because it tracks absolutely perfectly. Zero slop to the windage or the elevation, and the illumination down here, even on the middle section, is still way too bright for the environment that we're in. There's no shift to the reticle on our target when I change magnifications, and as I do a mini step test 4 mils over and up, you'll see that fine center chevron follows the lines on my tracking target flawlessly. Continuing up on the elevation, up to 9 mils indicated on my target, and everything lines up exactly where it should. And of course, it returns to 0 without any issues. Because I have so much coverage from the previous generation PLxCs both in the first and second focal plane, the rest of this video is going to be side-by-side comparisons. For the remainder of this video, the RDB will be on the left, and on the right, we're going to start out with the first focal plane PLxC. Take note of the reticles. They are slightly different, but the main core of what makes the reticle so good is still there and present with the RDB. I mean, yes, the center segmented circle on the first focal plane version on the right is larger than what we see with the RDB, and so is the chevron. But that was a criticism that a lot of people had against the standard first focal plane version because of how large that chevron is. Chevrons aren't for everybody. I like them, but I don't love them. I like how fast and easy you can get them on target, but as far as precision work, they do leave a lot to be desired. With the RDB, because we now have true daytime bright illumination, the reticle could be much smaller, allowing for a much finer aiming point, but still give you the true red dot bright experience behind it when you're at the lower magnifications. When you're at the higher magnifications here at 8x, you can see that the center chevron on the RDB is like 1/4 to 1/5 the size of what we see with the first focal plane. As far as the illuminations, there's no comparison between these two. If you have any experience with the first focal plane PLxCs and how the illumination is on those, the RDB absolutely blows it away. But that's not all, folks. In fact, that's not even scratching the tip of the surface. You see, a good friend of mine who's in the industry had talked to Primary Arms and to Low. Low is the Japanese OEM Light Optics Works that produced such optics like the NX8 and the PLxCs. They told him that they learned a lot when they developed this first focal plane PLxC, as well as the original NX8 2.5 to 20. And the experiences and information that they got and learned from and experienced have now been translated into a better product for you and I to enjoy. What that means is not only do we have exceptional illumination, but we also have a better image. These two scopes were filmed on very different days. The RDB was filmed on a very bright, sunny day. The first focal plane version was filmed on an overcast, cloudy day. But it doesn't matter, because you can instantly and immediately see that there is a dramatic difference between these two optically. The first focal plane up to 6x was always pretty solid, but going above and beyond that to its maximum of 8, it really started to taper off as far as how sharp the image would look. As you just saw, going from 6x to 8x, it falls apart rather quickly. It's still usable at the center, but the outside part of the image really does lose a lot of that pop. Whereas with the RDB, it is almost razor sharp edge to edge. This was a huge criticism of mine, and in my mega LPVO premium comparison, I didn't even say that right, but in that video, despite the shortcomings of the first focal plane PLxC, I still felt it was a very compelling option. Now, this RDB has not only improved upon the first focal plane PLxC with true daylight bright illumination, but now optically, it's also superior to that of the first and second focal plane PLxCs. So that makes this RDB absolutely awesome. There's nothing I could really complain about. Sure, when we go slightly off center, the illumination goes from very bright to dim to basically off at 8x, and the in-between magnifications, it's not the best. It still performs about the same as it does at 8x. In fact, here at 6x, you can see it looks like it's a little bit worse, in fact. But I would argue that at the higher magnifications, illumination becomes less and less important unless you are shooting in lower light environments, in which case you're going to be using a lower setting for the illumination anyway. Does it really make or break the overall experience of this? It's not ideal if you're in a very awkward position with a very rough cheek weld, but if you have a solid cheek weld and you're able to get really good repeatability on your gun, it won't matter anywhere near as much. Unfortunately, that's the only real negative about the RDB, is that the illumination will shut off very quickly. But it's not the first, nor will it be the last time we've seen LPVOs like this that do the exact same thing. I'm talking about you, Attacker and NX8. I'm talking about you, Gen 3 Razor. I'm talking about you, Mark 6 Loophole. All of you have illuminations that basically shut off when you're not perfectly behind them. That is why dual focal plane scopes are so in right now. And we're going to be taking a look at a dual focal plane scope very soon. And no, it's not the March Shorty. The image stability and the eye box on the first gen PLxC was always a little off. The RDB is still not the best, but it's far from the worst. It does improve upon the first focal plane and even second focal plane PLxCs even more so. So yes, the RDB is not only better with illumination, it's better with optical performance, it's better with clarity, it's better with eye box, it's better with everything you could possibly think of. And as far as the reticle goes, I absolutely love this thing because it gives you so many options of using this. You don't need the illumination to use this reticle effectively, but it's there. And it gives you a very fine center aiming point if you want to hold on center. So it's just, I don't know what people could complain about with this. I really hope that no one really does, because once you get behind one of these, I promise you it will change your perspective on a lot of things. There's not much else I could really say comparing the RDB to the PLxC in first or second focal plane, other than it's just better. Everything about it is better. Look at these two pictures side by side. These were filmed on very similar weather days. Yeah, we still see a little bit of chromatic aberration on the RDB as we do with the PLxC, especially on those high contrast backers to the targets. But just look at the sharpness on the center versus the outside edge between these two. There really is no comparison between them. The RDB absolutely trounces everything about the first focal plane PLxC. And that means that it's also better than the second focal plane PLxC. Whether you prefer the second focal plane versus the first focal plane, it's entirely up to you. However, this RDB for me is the absolute pinnacle of PLxC performance. It is incredible. I told you I'd bring out a dual focal plane scope, ladies and gentlemen, and it is in fact the Schmidt & Bender PM2 short dot dual focal plane. If you are unaware of what the Schmidt & Bender PM2s cost, well then you're in for a very rude awakening. They start at $5,000, whereas the RDB is in the $1,750 range. So needless to say, the RDB is a third the cost of the Schmidt & Bender. Now, when the review on the PM2 does come out relatively soon, I'd say within a couple of weeks to a month or so, you are going to be blown away by everything that the Schmidt & Bender has to offer. It has so many gizmos and gadgets and features that it makes me wonder why. Why? But I'm going to save that for the review. What I want you to really focus in on is how these two optics compare optically. The PM2 is by far and away the best looking optics of any 1:8 I've ever gotten behind. And it should, because it is twice the price, basically, of the Mark Shorty. And the peanut butter coloration that this one's in, they go up as high as $6,000. And they are made in Germany. And, they have, like I said, a laundry list of specifications and accessories. It hurts my brain to think about. But optically, the Schmidt & Bender PM2 is flawless. It is so sharp, it is so clear, it is so crisp that it really makes you just appreciate how capable something could be. So being able to compare the RDB to the SNB really is saying a lot about how good the PLxC RDB is. I'm comparing a $1,700 optic to a $5,000 optic. Yes, the Schmidt & Bender is better optically, but by such a small margin that unless your life depends on what the Schmidt & Bender has to offer, is it really going to be worth it? Only you will be able to answer that question. Just to give you a little bit of backstory about who sent in the Schmidt & Bender PM2 1:8, it is a Marine Raider, and he only sent this in because it's one of his spares. He loves this optic so much that he has several of them. I couldn't imagine having one, let alone several. And to quickly touch on the reticle at the lower magnifications on the PM2, you really can't see it without the illumination being on. But that's by design. Schmidt & Bender clearly states in their owner's manual that they wanted the reticle to be invisible at 1x, so this way you're using the illumination to have as little distraction as possible when you get behind this thing. So, as different as the Schmidt & Bender is to the RDB, there is some logic behind it. I'm still a big fan of some sort of redundancy, and having a reticle like what we see with the RDB just makes it that much easier to use it in case the illumination fails. If the Schmidt & Bender PM2's illumination fails or the battery dies at 1x, it's basically useless because the center dot that houses the bright illumination section on the second focal plane is so fine that you can't really see it. So definitely not everyone's cup of tea. I know personally it's not mine. Neither is how much of the scope body on the PM2 that we see compared to the RDB. The view looking through them is actually fairly similarly sized, but the amount of scope body is dramatically different between these two. As far as some specs, running them down, we already talked about the price and how dramatically different that is. Weight-wise, the Schmidt Bender comes in at 22 ounces. The RDB is just under 17, so that's another 5-ounce difference. As far as the field of view, there is a pretty sizable difference between these two. 121 to 14.6 for the RDB to 105 to 14.7. The exit pupils, however, this is the interesting part. The PLxC RDB is 8 millimeters to 3 millimeters, minimum to maximum, whereas the PM2 is 9.8 millimeters at the minimum, which I can absolutely attest to. It is gargantuan to get behind at 1x, but they're the exact same exit pupil at 8x, which is 3 millimeters. The eye relief on both of these are, as near as makes no difference, the same. The RDB has a spread from 3.2 to 3.7 inches, whereas the PM2 has an exact eye relief of 3.5 inches, which finds itself right in the middle of what the RDB claims. Optically, the PM2 is perfect. I cannot find any faults to it. But I'm honestly comparing these two side by side. So that really shows you how capable the RDB is. It's so impressive. It's such a step forward from the earlier PLxCs that I'm completely floored by it. There is a significant price difference between the RDB and the first focal plane version right now. It's about $250 or so. I'm sure that the first focal plane, even the second focal plane PLxCs will start going on sale a little bit more as the RDB start getting rolled out. So that gap of $200 to $300 might actually increase. Is the difference between the RDB and the rest of the PLx lineup worth the price difference? Absolutely. I'm going to say it right here, right now. It absolutely is. Not only do you get better illumination, but you get the better optical performance. So it really is a win-win. There's no sacrifices that you're making with the exception of a little bit more money. Granted, some people don't even want to spend $300 or $400 on an optic, let alone $300 to $400 more for an optic. So it's not going to be for everybody. But if you are a fan of the first focal plane or second focal plane PLxCs, the RDB will absolutely excite you and impress you. From the absolutely wonderful PM2 to the also absolutely wonderful size 6. This is a 1 to 6 first focal plane LPVO, and no, it does not have true daytime bright illumination. Again, it was by design of Psy themselves. They asked a lot of their customers about what they would prefer, and instead of having a very bright center dot illumination, they wanted the entire reticle to be illuminated. Now, if you paid very close attention to the Schmidt and Bender comparison we just left, that has the option of very bright center dot illumination or the rest of the drop reticle being illuminated. That's right, just like an Elk Inspector, it has multiple different reticle illumination options. Part of the reason why that thing costs upwards of $5,000. That is not the case with the size 6, however. This comes in at a much more palatable $1,300, and you could find them on sale for less than that. So at least a $400 price savings over the RDB. As far as the overall size and weight, they're actually very close to one another. The size 6 comes in about 3/4 of an inch longer than the RDB at 10 inches, and it comes in about an ounce heavier. The size 6 does offer some excellent controls and features, just like with the PLxCs. The reticle is not going to be for everyone's liking. I think it's a really good DMR style reticle, but I would like to see a couple of tweaks, most notably just the post at 369 to be full length like what we see with the RDB ACSS, because it's just so damn usable and practical at every magnification. The size 6 really works best from like 2x or so to its maximum here at 6x. Optically, the size 6 is incredible. It's also extremely well made. They are made in Japan, but ATI, or Armament Technologies Incorporated, was talking about having them be brought in-house and being made in Canada alongside Tangent Theta and Elkin. I don't know if that's still happening, but if it does, I'm sure it would only get better. Going from the magnification range lower down to one farther up. The Vortex Razor AMG 1 to 10 is about as good as you could possibly get in a 1 to 10. Now, it's true, I haven't reviewed all of the 1 to 10s in the first or second or dual focal planes, but the AMG is just so freaking impressive for what it is. It's so small, it's so light that it makes you question how other manufacturers can't do what they did with this optic. As far as what we see, as far as the overall length and weight, well, the RDB comes in at 9¼ inches. The AMG comes in at 8.5. So it's a 3/4 of an inch shorter than the RDB. It weighs a little bit heavier, around 19 ounces, but it's also a 34mm tube with a first focal plane 1:10, insanely bright illumination, just like the RDB. A reticle that is still not my favorite because you really need to use the illumination at the lower magnifications to get the most out of it, to extract the most capacity and potential with the AMG or the Gen 3 Razor for that matter, because the EBR is still the exact same between them. And those posts at 3, 6, and 9 are among the shortest of any first focal plane modern LPVO. Sure, there are shorter versions. Hell, some things like the Burris RT6 don't even have any posts. It's just this center area, and that's it. But the AMG is incredible for what it is. I don't know if anyone can produce anything better than this in this form factor. Small, light, and just insanely capable. But the RDB, for being 2x less on the top end, I think comes as close as we could possibly get in the civilian market currently. We're spoiled, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that we have something like this RDB available to us right now is just frankly incredible to me. It's sub $2,000. It's Japanese made. It's got a lifetime warranty. Prime Arms is very good at handling their warranties as well. And if you're a first responder, LEO, military, you can get a pretty sizable discount on these, about $200 off. So with tax and everything, you're talking about like $1,600 and change. This is a lot of optic for the money. If you are a fan of the original first focal plane or second focal plane version, you will absolutely be impressed by how this RDB performs. Now, will the optical improvements that I've seen with the RDB carry over and translate to the other generations? I'm not too sure. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I'm not going to hold my breath on it. There are, however, some whispers of other PLxC scopes coming to the market. Not just the 2.5 to 20, which will, I'm pretty confident, be taking the same shape and size of the Nightforce NX8 2.5 to 20 by 50 and improving upon it, but there's also whispers of a 1.5 to 12. And it makes me laugh because when I did my initial review on the first focal plane PLxC, I told Marshall, the CEO of Primary Arms, that they should absolutely 100% take this platform, this tiny PLxC, with its very good glass and reticle design, and carry that into a more IPVO, MPVO optic range. And I actually mentioned to him like a 1.5 to 12 would be insane. Think of it. This optic at 1.5x at the bottom is only giving up a half x, but with this reticle would actually be even better. And then getting 4x extra on the top end, give it a much larger front objective, an adjustable side parallax, and an exposed locking zero-stopped turret, and capped windage, of course, because that's the only way I would personally prefer it, and you would have yourself probably one of the most enticing IPVOs on the market. When I mentioned that to him, they said, we're not really interested in that right now, or at least the market isn't trending that way. That was a little bit over 3 years ago. And here we are, September of 25, and there are whispers of that optic being produced currently, or at least it's in development. I'm not going to hold my breath for it to come out, but if it does, I reckon it's going to be really good, and unfortunately, I'm not going to get any sort of recognition for it. But you heard it here first, folks. As far as the 2.5 to 20, I am insanely excited for that because the NX8 2.5 to 20 is one of the best optics in that sort of magnification range, And I've heard nothing but great things about the PLxC in that magnification, saying that it's only better than the NX8 in almost every single facet, which is mind-blowing to think about. As far as this PLxC RDB, what else could I say that I haven't said ad nauseum? It is, without a shadow or question of doubt, my favorite first focal plane LPVO in the 1:8 magnification range. It is small, it is lightweight, it has an incredibly designed reticle, it has excellent illumination, and now it's got the sharpness and clarity at 8x that it should have had from the beginning. Yes, it is expensive for a lot of people, myself included. $2,000 is more than I've spent on any optic at a single time. But if you are looking for one of the best performances in a small lightweight package that's a 1:8, look no further than the PLxC RDB. With all that being said, I have to first thank Primary Arms for sending this optic in for me to review. They've sent a lot of optics in for me to review, and if you think that I'm just going to give it a good review because they sent it in, well then you should watch my second focal plane review. You should watch some of my SLX and GLX reviews, because if they don't really hit the mark, I don't really say that they do. I tell it as straight and as forward like it is, because like you, I'm a consumer and I don't want to be BS'd. I want to be told someone's true firsthand experiences behind something. But the proof is in the pudding, and you can see for yourself that this thing is truly fantastic. So Primary Arms, thank you very much for sending this in for me to review. Thank all of you for watching, and I hope to see you all again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.